Imagine if we were not 2 weeks and 1 day away from a presidential election, but rather 2 weeks and 1 day away from a threatened invasion by a foreign cult figure of some kind. Imagine if that foreign invader intended to take over control of our government and had already declared that when he did so, he intended to remove 11 million people who lived here, which would require putting them first in camps and then presumably in other countries. Imagine if that foreign invader had already declared he would, upon taking control, put up a wall along one of our national borders. Imagine if that foreign invader had repeatedly praised the leadership of such dictatorships as Russia and North Korea, and then went on national television here in front of tens of millions of Americans and explained that the dictator of Syria was much tougher and smarter than the American leaders. Imagine if that foreign invader had already declared he intended to institute a religious test for anybody entering into the new country and intended to bar any members of a certain religion from coming here, and said others coming here would have to be granted ideological certification. Imagine if that foreign invader had already declared he would have his troops kill the families of terrorism suspects, that he would institute racial profiling to find terrorism suspects, and that he would institute national stop and frisk racial profiling to find criminal suspects. Imagine if that foreign invader had already made dog whistle threats about international banks against members of the Jewish faith in this country, and if that foreign invader had once reportedly kept in a cabinet near his bed a book of the speeches of Adolf Hitler. Imagine if that foreign invader had repeatedly praised the leadership of such dictatorships of North Korea and Russia, and was connected personally and by members of his gang, past and present, to the Russian dictator. And imagine that then he said that even before he solidified control over his country, he might personally meet with the Russian dictator. Imagine if that foreign invader had asked publicly on live television why the country he intended to take over had nuclear weapons if it did not intend to use those nuclear weapons. Imagine if that foreign invader had declared that all of our treaties, economic and military, would be abrogated or canceled or subject to renegotiation, and that our primary military treaty, NATO, might apply only to countries that paid us protection money. Imagine if that foreign invader had declared our elections rigged, our debates crooked, and the leaders of both of our main parties dishonest, and 3 times had refused to say that the loser of the most important of these elections was even obligated to honor the outcome. Imagine if that foreign invader had implied groups of Americans should try to intimidate other groups of Americans from voting, and that those Americans with guns should act in some manner against leaders of whom they did not approve. Imagine if that foreign invader had spent 4 years constantly insisting that our foremost elected leader was ineligible for his office, and then claimed the man was actually the co-founder of the most heinous terrorist group in the world. Imagine if that foreign invader had already promised to, when he took over, do everything he could to put at least one of our leading political figures in prison. Imagine if that foreign invader had declared that our freedom of the press should no longer be protected, that freedom of the press does not include printing things he believes are not true, that he would make it easier to sue the media, that readers should cancel subscriptions to the newspapers that criticized him, and that even entertainment programs that displeased him should be, quote, retired. Imagine if that foreign invader had questioned why a suspect in a minor terrorism attack should be granted access to a lawyer, or access to a doctor, or access to food. Imagine if that foreign invader had already declared that our country was rife with lawlessness and race riots, especially where the members of minority groups live, and that he was going to fix that by whatever means were necessary. Imagine if that foreign invader had declared that some of our inner cities were more dangerous than Afghanistan, and that drugs are a very, very big factor in protests in those areas, and that those areas were as bad as a third world country. Imagine if that foreign invader had declared that America was in a, quote, death spiral. And imagine if that foreign invader had surveyed all of the problems, real and imagined, of the country he intended to take over 2 weeks from tomorrow and declared, I alone can fix it, and then had television statements that claimed that he said, he will protect you because he is the only one who can. Imagine if all that was what we face 2 weeks from tomorrow. It truly isn't hard to do, because that is exactly what we do face 2 weeks from tomorrow. That's the closer. I'm Keith Olbermann. Watch this space.